I'm Dustin Tysick, and in this talk, I'm going to be talking a little bit about, how to let your customers sell for you, and to do that through building a customer video content strategy. So let's dive in. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to dive right into the presentation and skip the little background slide about me. So you're probably wondering what's in it for you. Why should you be listening to this talk? So I'm going to start with that. So here's some things that you're going to get out of this talk. You're going to learn a little bit about how to conduct better customer interviews and get a list of questions that you can borrow or steal, use anywhere you want. You're going to get a framework as well on how to create customer content for every stage of the buyer's journey. You're going to get some actionable tips on how to create content and which topics to cover at which stage. And then finally, I'm going to show you what we're doing internally and what we're helping our customers do, so you have some real life examples to steal. Before we dive into that, though, I do want to explain a little bit why I think this is important and give you a bit of background on it. So it really boils down to this, right? Your buyers don't want to hear from you, they want to hear from their peers. And I know as a marketer or seller, this can be tough to hear, but people trust us about as much as they trust lawyers or car salesmen. Like, we're pretty far down the list there. I mean, in fact, according to Forrester, only 29% of buyers completely or somewhat trust salespeople and marketers. And it's brutal, right? But I mean, we kind of did this to ourselves. There's even a saying out there that marketers ruin everything. And as a marketer, I feel like I can say this about myself. Between gated ebooks, spammy emails, aggressive ads, and sales tactics, we've kind of earned this reputation. So what do you do then? On the flip side, 90% of buyers completely or somewhat trust their peers. And you're seeing this with different marketing sales communities where peers are recommending products and services. So dark social for the win, right? I mean, kind of like, yes, dark social matters. You need to build up your reputation. You need to generate demand. You got to get people talking about you so that your buyers hear about you from their peers. The tricky part is you can't fully control that message. Like, it's organic and that's by necessity. And if you try to control it and you start, selling in the communities or planting people there, it's just going to ruin it and it's going to backfire on you. So yes, dark social, build awareness, build reputation, but I'm going to talk a bit about a different way to do this. So it's not quite 90%, but 85% of buyers completely or somewhat trust customers of vendors. Pretty self-explanatory here, right? These are basically peers as well, who bought a solution or service to solve similar problems that you might have. Of course, more trustworthy than marketer or salesperson. So reviews, case study, and reference calls for the win. I mean, kind of like, we're all doing this already. It's kind of a point of parity, and I'm going to go into why, you might need more than this. But first, before I explain that, like, I do want to point out here, I know, yes, the buyer's journey isn't a straight line. Put down the pitchforks. I get it, but for the sake of my poor design skills, let's pretend it is and work with this diagram. So I want to start with traditional social proof. So let's start with reference calls, okay? So unless the reference call goes completely sideways, it's just a box the buyer has to check at the end of the journey. Next up, case studies. So these are mostly consumed partway through the journey, usually because they live on your website. And let's be real, when was the last time you really read one beginning to end? I mean, even someone super interested in your product is rarely going to read a case study. They're going to look for a company in a similar industry, similar size. They're going to scan the case study and they're going to call it a day. Again, checkbox, right? And finally, reviews. So reviews definitely cover more of the journey. I know when I'm even considering a product or service, I go to reviews. The issue, though, as marketers, as you know, the system is gamified. And this is to varying extents, whether it's pay $25 to someone to give you a review or whether it's pay to show up at the top of a review listing site. So we know most reviews are incentivized and the content is pretty generic because it's the same set of questions for everyone. So here's how I approach review sites as a buyer. If it's a 4.8 or a 4.9, I don't care. That's a wash. They're kind of the same. I probably can't differentiate. If it's a 5.0, I don't trust the company because they probably paid for them all. If it's 4.2-ish or below, I'm a little worried about the company. So what I do is, if it's a reasonable score, I filter by 1 to 3 stars. I read the poor reviews, and again, it's a checkbox. So yes, do all these things for sure. But for the most part, these are checkbox pieces of social proof that are a point of parity that you need. I will talk about a different approach and some techniques here, right? But I want to drive this home first. Trust is 100% necessary to close deals. It's not 2021 anymore. We don't all have a whole whack of money and we're freewheeling and buying everything and throwing cash around. It's not monopoly money anymore. So people are potentially putting their job and reputation on the line when they pick a new product or service. And I want you to look at trust as currency. So trust is something where you need to start making deposits very early in the journey before the customer reach out to you so you can close those trust gaps. And the reason why this is so important is because I'm going to argue there's this whole hidden pipeline of potential buyers who haven't reached out to you. And in most cases, haven't even been to your website. So, yes, we market to these people, right? We run targeted ads. We talk a lot about us to make them aware. But I would argue most companies, when it comes to social proof, only focus on that 3% that is already in market at any given time. So, I'm going to give you some techniques to really attack this hidden pipeline and build trust throughout the entire buyer's journey. And just to drive it home a bit, like this is self explanatory, but you're losing deals you didn't even know existed if you aren't focused on this. So, strategy eats checkbox for lunch or something. I mean, it doesn't roll off the tongue quite as easy as Peter Drucker's quote, but the short of it is companies that focus on telling customer stories in a strategic way will stand out and close deals faster than companies that are just box checkers and are kind of mailing in social proof and calling it a day. So, I've rallied a bunch against checkbox content versus strategic, and I haven't really explained the difference. So, this is how I look at it and how I break it down. Checkbox is when you have a list of industries and or personas and you just work your way down the checklist, right? Just working your way down slowly, creating customer content. Usually this is in the form of case studies. And the classic example, and as marketers, you probably felt this, is sales comes to you and requests or demands, depending on the salesperson, a case study from a particular industry or persona. So as a marketer, you go through, you pull a list of customers from your CRM, you reach out to a few customers, probably through your customer success team, and then you create a generic kind of templated case study to get sales off your back. You don't enjoy creating it, your buyers don't enjoy reading it, but it's a checkbox. And with checkbox content, distribution is always an afterthought. So you churn out the content, you throw it on your website, you make a LinkedIn post maybe, and then you let it just drift into the ether. A strategic approach is a little bit different. So a strategic approach, instead of a checklist of industries to go after, it's focused on the questions, fears, and doubts at each stage of the journey. So it tells compelling stories focused on these QFDs, question, fears, and doubts, and focuses on the storytelling and what the distribution plan is before creation. So strategically mapping out the style, the type, the length of content, and where it's going to be promoted. So a bit of a different approach. And the end goal here really is full coverage with customer stories across all the QFDs at all stages of the journey. So maybe a bit of an aspirational thing and hard to get to, and you're going to want to prioritize, but that is the end goal. And it all starts with customer interviews. So the key to better customer content is better customer interviews. And interviewing is hard. So I've hosted 100, 150 podcast episodes over the past 5-6 years. Looking back at the first few, I sucked at interviewing. It was really hard. Just now, I feel like I'm okay at it, but it's tough. It's a learned skill. And it's not something that people can naturally pick up. That's my argument, at least. So take the time to work on your craft. And I'm going to give some tips here on how to have better customer interviews. So I'm going to show a few examples, and I'm starting off with a really easy one. So an okay question is, do you like working with Acme Inc? It's not bad. A better question is, what's your favorite thing about working with Acme Inc? So subtle difference, but the key point here is ask open-ended questions. Like, yes, you can ask a follow-up question after a yes/no question, but it breaks the flow of the conversation. So an open-ended question gets the conversation flowing. It will give your editors more to work with. It will give you more quotes to choose from. A bit more in-depth example here. An okay question is, what were some impacts of the challenges you had before working with Acme Inc? It's not a bad question, but it doesn't make its intent really clear. On the flip side, what you can do here, since we're trying to get at challenges, you could ask, prior to working with Acme Inc, what pain points or challenges were you facing? So that gets them thinking about the before state, before they worked with you. Then you can follow that up with what impact did those challenges have on your day-to-day operations? So it seems like a minor wording change, but keep in mind, you're promoting an individual story of a person and you're promoting it to people like them. So you want to know about jobs to be done, day-to-day operations. You want to get into that specificity. It matters. So that's really why this question works. I'm not going to go through all these. I only have 25 minutes, but you can download the deck after if you want. Take these questions, use them. But I do want to highlight a couple. It's really important to map your interview to the different stages of the buyer's journey and ask questions unique to each stage. So for demand gen, a question like, prior to working with this company, what pain points or challenges were you facing? Like the one I just mentioned, is a great question because It focuses on the problem that you solve instead of what your company does and who you are. I'll get into this more, but at this stage, your buyers don't care about your company yet. They just care about themselves and the problems they have. So create content for that. On the sales enablement side, a question like, when you were considering working with us, what were some concerns you had, is a really solid question to get objections out front. You can follow that up with, how did you overcome that? How do you feel now? And you get this nice coherent story of, yeah, I had the same objection or concern that you might have as a buyer. I'm glad that I overcame that and I'm happy where I am today. And then finally, on the retention expansion side, a question like, moving forward, what role do you see us playing in your future, is a great one to ask. It lets them get specific about future plans and expansion opportunities. And again, it lets maybe a new customer look through the lens of an experienced customer and how they progressed, and kind of greases the wheel also a little bit on the retention expansion side. So I'm going to talk about content plans. I'm going to show examples, all that good stuff, but I want to give a few interview best practices first. And I think the short of it is, interviewing is nerve-wracking. Being interviewed is even worse, right? So here are some best practices to get more out of an interview. Quick, easy one here. To start it off, ask a few questions first that are really easy for them to answer. So could be generic, do you have plans on the weekend? It could be, what's your favorite dinosaur, right? Like, you just want them to relax, get an answer out there, and get the conversation going. Next, remind the interviewee they can answer a question as many times as they want. It isn't a one-shot deal. It doesn't have to be scripted. It's going to work better if it is an organic conversation and they get multiple attempts. That way, editors can pick and choose the perfect stuff, and it's going to be way more authentic. Next, encourage water breaks or rests. Once you get over like a 15-20 minute interview, it can be a bit much. So let the interviewee know their comfort is key. They can take a rest, they can do a quick timeout. It's totally fine. And even if they don't utilize the breaks, which they usually won't, knowing it's an option will just help them relax and be more comfortable. Next up, question order matters. So you want to ask questions in a way that builds on the customer's experience and builds context. So for example, start with the struggles they face first, have them detail the value your company is providing. Then at the end, ask, would you recommend this company to a friend and why? Then they have context to pull from. They'll likely draw, a through string through the entire thing, and you'll have an easier time for your editors to craft a story. You also want to plan follow-up questions because people will talk at varying lengths. So you need follow-up questions to dive deep, and you need to plan these because interviewing is hard and you really want to be prepared. And finally, have a goal. It sounds simple, sounds obvious, but make sure you go into it with sound bites or key phrases that you want to get. So our company will, we do a create a brief onboarding form, and we ask that specifically. What is the ideal phrase you would like to hear from this customer? And then we craft questions around that to try to get to that point. Okay, so that's the first step, right? Have a good interview, ask good questions. Simple, but not easy. Next up, you want to create content for each stage, and you can really only do this if you ask the right questions. So I want to highlight here, not all content is created equal. And just imagine if you got served a 2,000 word beast of a case study as a cold LinkedIn ad. You would never read it. And the same thing goes for videos. So you need to break this down. Here's a total eye test. Don't bother trying to read it right now. Again, download the deck. It is in there. But the key here is really to map your goals, metrics, channels, and topics for each stage. So I'm going to go one by one through these stages real quick and give a few quick tips and takeaways. So for potential customers who aren't aware of you at all, you want to make them aware of you by using your customer stories. The goal here, make them aware, generate demand. The trick is these potential customers do not care about you. They don't care about your company at all. So don't post a generic recommendation from a customer saying, it was great working with Acme, I loved it. It won't resonate. Instead, focus on the problems you solve, focus on evangelizing your category, and tell the story of before and after your product category or service instead of just before or after your company. It's more interesting for buyers this way. Pretty obvious one here. These need to be short, 15 to 45 seconds. And depending on your go-to-market, there's different ways to measure success. So in our case, one of our main go-to-market strategies is cold LinkedIn ads to an uploaded account list. We measure how many of these accounts get impressions, how many of these accounts engage with our ads as a measure of awareness. Quick pro tip here, use multiple voices and quicker cuts. We all have the attention span of a goldfish, so use multiple voices, have it jump around quickly, you'll get higher retention rates. Next up, once they're aware of the problem you solve and they're starting to feel a little bit, you can focus on differentiators and ROI and all that, but I advocate as well for focusing on the cost of inaction. It's a bit underutilized here. So instead of droning on about what happens if they use your software service, focus on what happens if they don't. Have these videos attack the status quo. Still, these are early stage videos. They have to be short. And the key metrics are similar to the previous stage. In our case, we also measure how many of those key accounts actually end up on our website. So you can do this. It's not perfect, but through reverse IP tracking, there's a bunch of ways, but that's our approach. And pro tip here, you'll notice the videos get progressively longer. So unpack what you teased in prior videos and really build that coherent narrative. Okay, so now they're in market, they've been to your site, probably been to all your competitors' site, and you really need to focus on using the voice of customer to reassure the prospect that you're the right fit. So one great way to do this is to address common objections. We call them objection crushers, but really it's objection handling before a sales call. So, your sales team is used to handling these objections. They have their script, but why not prime the pump a little bit and have customers talking about how they overcame these objections on your website, in ads and marketing emails? And as for metrics, you want sales calls and legit opportunities here, and you have a bit more leeway with length, so up to 90 seconds. Mentioned this a few times, especially at this stage, generic recommendations are not enough. So focus on specific customer stories and get into the details. Okay, so now it's really coming down to it. Your sales team has had a demo, trying to close the deal, and specificity really, really matters here. Usually there's a blocker, you're competing against competitors, status quo, budget's an issue. So make sure you have an arsenal, and I'll show a spreadsheet of how we do this later, of short customer videos that address any and all things that could kill a deal. Obvious place here, sales presentation, sales follow-ups. I do want to give a tip here on using them in your contracts. So we have customers who do this. It's that last second reassurance and nudge across the finish line where there's a voice of customer, a video embedded in the contract talking about why they're happy with their decision. Mentioned this a few times, but pro tip, map out your objections. Sales probably has this done for you. Just take it so you have them all and then start building. And this is probably the most overlooked use of customer stories. And I'd argue net retention is more important than net new revenue for most companies nowadays. So say you're a company that has multiple products or even just multiple product tiers. Instead of harping on your customers about why they should upgrade, have happy users explain why they upgraded or added a new product line of yours. So again, using your customers to sell for you to existing customers is really powerful. And one really interesting play I've seen used quite a bit is, create these videos from your beta users. They're excited, they want to be highlighted. Use that to get them talking about how excited they are. Run it as ads to your current customers, including your customer newsletter, have a customer spotlight in your community. It's a great way to promote your new product through the lens of your customers. Okay, so that's a lot of videos, right? And as I mentioned, this is a multi-year, constantly evolving exercise. And I've harped on video because it's the highest fidelity and you can break it down to different medias. But I want to show some real life examples so you have something to take away here. So here's some examples that show kind of how we're eating our own dog food and using our own product as a company. So quick example here to show using multiple videos from a single interview. HubSpot for startups is a customer of ours. HubSpot holds a ton of weight amongst our audience, which is marketers and sellers. So we wanted to get a ton of mileage out of one interview. So we broke it down across the whole funnel, but a specific example here is a common objection we get is, I already have an internal video team. I don't need you. So we had HubSpot on video saying, hey, we have a great internal video team, but we still work with them because it's tough to get into the queue for our video team. And I really want to scale customer stories and I need a strategic partner to do that. So we make that argument as sellers, but having a customer do it is stronger. I mentioned this is a quick one, short testimonial videos on LinkedIn. Here's a remarketing example. Again, under 30 seconds, quick cuts, lots of ways to do this. Another interesting use case is most sites have a value prop type section, right? So usually left, right, image and text. Replace that image with a video and a quick quote of a customer reinforcing your value prop. You'll see this throughout our site. We do this a lot. So it's a customer promoting what we say and kind of reinforcing it. On the sales enablement side, great salespeople have this library of customer stories that they pull out at any time, just out of their brain on sales calls. Non-experienced reps and new reps, or if you have rep churn, they won't have this yet. So provide it for them. Here's a screenshot of exactly what we use. It has the key messages broken down. They can filter by the type of topic. They can filter by industry and everything to have that list of stories. So I know that was a lot in 20, 25 minutes. I do want to quickly go over some key takeaways though, just to drive it all home. So number one, if you take anything away, say goodbye to checkbox content. It isn't enough anymore. It doesn't stand out, and you're burning resources. Keep in mind the real work starts well before the interview. So map out your QFDs, craft interview questions, and think about distribution. Yes, it's more work up front, but you're going to get more use out of your videos. On that note, a 30 to 45-minute customer interview is invaluable, even from a research perspective. Make the most out of it. Get as much content as you can. And finally, as with anything in marketing, think, would I watch this video? Would I read this case study? If the answer is no, that's fine. But next time, keep that in mind and always strive for that so that your customer stories actually get consumed. So thank you for listening to this talk. It was a lot of fun to put together. I hope you got something out of it you can take away. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Dustin Tysick on there, so you'll find me no problem. I talk about this sort of stuff, different marketing and sales topics, so always open to connect. Or if you'd like to, you can check out Testimonial Hero at testimonialhero.com. All right, thanks so much.